This is News 8 at 11 a.m.
She said, "How did he die?" And I said, "He couldn't breathe."
The family of George Floyd speaking out in an emotional interview this morning. This as they get ready to lay him to rest. Good morning. Thanks so much for watching us. I'm Stella Escobedo.
Yeah, I'm Eric Conner. Glad you're with us here. We will show you the rest of that interview here in just a couple of moments. We are also waiting on a possible announcement from the Minnesota Attorney General's office on additional charges for the other 3 officers at the scene where George Floyd died while in custody.
And as soon as we get any of that information, we will, of course, bring it to you. But first, today will mark another day of protests around the county calling for an end to racial inequalities in law enforcement. Last night, protesters took to the streets of downtown, and they did so peacefully. News 8's Chris Groh joins us live now with a look at where we stand at this hour, as well as the day ahead. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Eric and Stella, and we're trying to keep a close eye on exactly what could be happening in and around the county, and specifically here downtown, because just 24 hours ago, Balboa Park was filled with dozens, if not about 100 protesters getting ready to march, which they did just yesterday very peacefully. So let's talk about what we saw in that protest yesterday. Of course, it mimicked that echo that we've been hearing across the country, that call for an end to racial inequality, police brutality, and justice as well. Now, what we have also seen is that this was mostly a group of young people. This was some students from City College, nearby City College, as well as some others. Now, what was unique about this protest was the fact that, according to organizers, they did not want to put this out over social media because they did not want their message, like we just spoke about, justice for George Floyd, an end to police brutality. They didn't want that getting hijacked by agitators, and so what they did is they just relied on word of mouth and just knowing who to contact, but then also relying on people seeing this movement and then joining in organically. And that's exactly what happened. It was peaceful from beginning to end. They started here at Balboa Park. They made their way down to the Hillcrest area. They marched around 6th Avenue. Then they came back here and eventually ended the night at the county administration building. Now, San Diego Police Department was with them from the very beginning, watching from afar here at Balboa Park, and then eventually moving with them as they were marching to make sure that they didn't get in the way of traffic and traffic didn't get in the way of them, trying to keep everybody safe during a march and a demonstration like this. And they have said from the beginning that they will repeatedly be facilitating these peaceful demonstrations so long as they don't turn violent. Now, on Tuesday, this is what we saw, but on Monday, obviously, we saw an end to that protest, that Monday night protest that ended in front of San Diego Police Headquarters because they called it an unlawful assembly. That's not what happened yesterday. In fact, on Monday, 17 people were arrested. We don't know if anybody was arrested yesterday. We are still waiting to find out. We have contacted San Diego Police Department to see if there were any agitators, anybody that maybe broke off from the group and did something that got them arrested. But so far, we have not heard of anything like that. And they did get their message across both loudly but then also peacefully. Guys, back to you.
Chris, thank you. In other parts of the country, protesters clashed with police last night.
But there wasn't the level of looting and other destruction seen in previous nights' unrest sparked by the death of George Floyd. Michael George has the latest now from Minneapolis.
Officers in Charlotte, North Carolina used pepper spray on protesters after telling them to disperse. A peaceful protest in Portland, Oregon also escalated as the night wore on.
I saw a smoke grenade kicked within like 2 feet of us, so I went out and I tried to kick it back at the police officers. I saw about 10 more shot onto the street when we were all just standing there, and I continued to try to do the same thing, and I was smashed down to the ground by a police officer.
In New York City, police blocked protesters on the Manhattan Bridge who had defied the city's 8 p.m. curfew. There were some arrests, but there wasn't the amount of looting and violence seen in previous nights. Earlier in the day, there were peaceful protests throughout New York City. And in George Floyd's hometown of Houston, an estimated crowd of 60,000 held a moment of silence. St. Louis is also in mourning for retired police captain David Dorn, who was shot and killed early Tuesday during a looting at a pawn shop.
This is just so senseless, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired.
Here in Minneapolis, this site where George Floyd lost his life has become a growing memorial to his life. It's manned by volunteers 24/7, and last night they raced to protect the flowers and cards from the rain. Many say the city needs to make this spot a permanent memorial.
Sometimes things happen in a moment and then we move on, but this needs to be a monument that's forever changed who we are and what we do.
A memorial service for Floyd is planned for tomorrow. Michael George, CBS News, Minneapolis.
Yesterday, Minnesota launched a civil rights investigation into the Minneapolis Police Department. It will review the department's policies, procedures, and practices during the last 10 years. And these protests are spreading outside of the U.S. and into other countries across the world, from Australia to Argentina, Bethlehem, Tel Aviv. Solidarity poured out into the streets in various organized marches. In London, thousands attended a rally to back the Black Lives Matter movement and to let protesters in the U.S. know that they're not alone.
Got your back, we support you, keep doing it, try and stay peaceful, try and stay non-violent as much as possible, but listen, we see everything over here, we've got your back.
Demonstrators say they aren't just there to back American protesters, they're also demanding racial equality in their own countries, as many around the world. A memorial service for George Floyd will take place tomorrow in Minneapolis, and Floyd's 6-year-old daughter Gianna and her mother will be there.
Jamie Yuka sat down with Gianna and her mother to ask them about their loss.
He just didn't deserve that.
For Roxy Washington, seeking justice for George Floyd is only part of the tragic story.
He loved God. He loved children. He loved his kid.
What are you going to miss most about him?
Everything.
Washington is the mother of Floyd's 6-year-old daughter, Gianna, who is now without a father.
I pray God when she grows up, she never run across the footage of hate.
We asked Gianna what she loved most about her father.
He used to carry me on his back all the time.
Was that fun?
Uh-huh. It was super fun.
What was fun about it?
It's like you be up the sky, like an airplane.
What would he say to you?
He loved me a lot.
Gianna heard the news of her father's death on television.
She said, "How did he die?" And I said, "He couldn't breathe."
This young lady is traumatized forever. It's not going to go away. It has changed the trajectory of her life.
Justin Miller is Washington's attorney. He's joining protesters around Minneapolis and the country, calling on all 4 officers involved in Floyd's death to be charged and convicted, even though he says it will never be true justice.
You can't put a value on a father.
You're never bringing him back.
Never. And you can't put a value on it. It is a priceless thing that far too many black children in this country are dealing with the loss of.
Washington says she's speaking up so that this never happens to another family again.
No, I have to be strong, because that's what he would want me to do.
Do you hope that there's change so that she grows up in a different world?
I pray that there is change. We got targets on our backs, and it's the truth.
The Floyd family attorney told CBS News they're expecting charges to be filed against the other 3 officers involved. As for the Minneapolis Police Department, the chief says it will cooperate with the state's Human Rights Commission's investigation. Jamie Yuka, CBS News, Minneapolis.
Happening today, people in Escondido plan to take a knee for racial injustice. It's part of a demonstration happening outside Escondido City Hall at noon. Organizers say a bell will toll 9 times in remembrance of George Floyd. Local leaders are expected to attend, including Escondido's mayor and police chief. We will have a live report coming up on News 8 at noon. 2 emergency meetings reviewing the San Diego Police Department's de-escalation of force policies are happening tonight and tomorrow, and they're on your screen here. So tonight, the Citizens Advisory Board on Police and Community Relations will meet at 6 p.m., followed by a Thursday evening meeting of the Community Review Board on Police Practices. Mayor Kevin Faulconer says the goal is to create a larger dialogue and understanding between our officers and the community. So you can participate in both meetings, and you can find all the information you need at cbs8.com.
And this just in, La Mesa officials will be holding a media conference at 4 this afternoon. They are expected to release body camera footage of this incident between a white police officer and a black man, Amari Johnson. It happened last week near the Grossmont trolley stop. The officer is now on leave, and the city of La Mesa has appointed an outside investigator. Officials are also expected to discuss this weekend's protest outside of the La Mesa Police Department headquarters. It is going to get hot in some parts of our county today. So just how hot will it get? Let's go ahead and check in with News 8's Neda Rampur. She's standing by with a first look at your weather. Not a bad place to be right now, right by the beach.
Yeah, at the water, it's not going to feel as uncomfortable, but wow, it is already getting hot right now at this 11 o'clock hour. We are feeling those temperatures. We're live at Mission Bay here today, and we've seen a few people launching out here at the boat launch and just enjoying a day on the water. Don't blame them at all. Go for your kayak if you can and paddleboard around, because that's going to keep you cool, because we are looking at the possibility of perhaps tying a record in downtown San Diego. So let's show you the potential highs for today. Downtown expected to possibly hit 82 degrees. It's already fairly warm there right now, and that would tie a record that was set in 2006. Borrego reached 113 back in 2006. Don't expect to hit that hot today, but we'll watch that one closely. And then Escondido expected to reach low 90s. So we're talking pretty uncomfortable heat in the inland areas and especially the deserts. This is what you can expect for this afternoon. Nearby 1, 2 o'clock, when we reach the heat of the day, the peak of the day, we should say, the temperatures will reach the low 90s for Poway, for Ramona, Alpine, El Cajon, get ready for 90 degrees, 80 in Chula Vista. Across the North County, also really warm. That's about 10 degrees above average, in the mid to upper 70s for most coastal locations. Campo, a steamy 94 degrees. We're also talking about humidity out here. So normally we would see these numbers, our dew points, down around 50 degrees or so along the coast, but we're still in the 60s right now, mid 60s for some locations. And that humidity is extending pretty far inland too. So those dew points are high, even in places that would typically see these pretty low numbers, even the mountains and deserts in the 40s and 30s. And when we're talking about dry air, we're usually down in the single digits and teens. So we're well away from that. There's enough moisture in the air, and a lot of that because of this ridge of high pressure. That heat really is bringing on some of that humidity too, and that low that's to the west, not at all contributing to cooling things down today, but then things will change by tomorrow. So it's a short-lived heat wave. It really started on Monday, but it's going to peak today, and that's why the excessive heat warning does start in the deserts in about 45 minutes. Temperatures could reach over 110 degrees for Borrego, for Ocotillo. In fact, look at this, excessive heat warnings throughout much of the desert southwest, pretty much half of Arizona, a big chunk of Nevada, and then also that heat advisory extending from central California all the way up to northern California. So the west coast really dominated by that ridge, and that's why we're noticing temperatures getting so hot out here. But like I said, it's short-lived. By tomorrow, temperatures will drop on down about 5 more degrees. By Friday, we're talking about a 10 to 20 degree dive in those temperatures. So our weather pattern certainly is about to change. So back here live, as you can see, people are getting set up to go out and kayak. We've seen a lot of people taking their bike ride or bikes around, going for a ride this morning, and also that wind is certainly contributing. If you're by the water, there's still that slight onshore breeze, and that certainly does help kind of push around that hot air. But inland, we feel for you, because that's where that heat certainly is, and those deserts.